Section 28 of the Pirates of Panama, the Buccaneers of America, by A.O. Exquemelin, translated by G.A. Williams. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Dennis Sayers. Chapter 18. Captain Morgan sends canoes and boats to the South Sea. He fires the city of Panama. Robberies and cruelties committed there by the pirates till their return to the castle of Chagres. Captain Morgan, as soon as he had placed necessary guards at several quarters within and without the city, commanded 25 men to seize a great boat, which had stuck in the mud of the port, for want of water, at a low tide. The same day, about noon, he caused fire privately to be set to several great edifices of the city, nobody knowing who were the authors thereof, much less on what motives Captain Morgan did it, which are unknown to this day. The fire increased so that before night the greatest part of the city was in flame. Captain Morgan pretended the Spaniards had done it, perceiving that his own people reflected on him for that action. Many of the Spaniards, and some of the pirates, did what they could either to quench the flame, or by blowing up houses with gunpowder, and pulling down others, to stop it, but in vain, for in less than half an hour it consumed a whole street. All the houses of the city were built with cedar, very curious and magnificent, and richly adorned, especially with hangings and paintings, whereof part were before removed, and another great part were consumed by fire. There were in the city, which is the see of a bishop, 8 monasteries, 7 for men and 1 for women, 2 stately churches, and 1 hospital. The churches and monasteries were all richly adorned with altar pieces and paintings, much gold and silver, and other precious things, all which the ecclesiastics had hidden. Besides which, here were 2,000 houses of magnificent building, the greatest part inhabited by merchants vastly rich. For the rest of less quality, and tradesmen, this city contained 5,000 more. Here were also many stables for the horses and mules that carried the plate of the King of Spain, as well as private men, toward the North Sea. The neighboring fields are full of fertile plantations and pleasant gardens, affording delicious prospects to the inhabitants all the year. The Genoese had in this city a stately house for their trade of negroes. This likewise was by Captain Morgan burnt to the very ground. Besides which building, there were consumed 200 warehouses, and many slaves, who had hid themselves therein, with innumerable sacks of meal, the fire of which continued 4 weeks after it had begun. The greatest part of the pirates still encamped without the city, fearing and expecting the Spaniards would come and fight them anew, it being known they much outnumbered the pirates. This made them keep the field, to preserve their forces united, now much diminished by their losses. Their wounded, which were many, they put into 1 church, which remained standing, the rest being consumed by the fire. Besides these decreases of their men, Captain Morgan had sent a convoy of 150 men to the castle of Chagres, to carry the news of his victory at Panama. They saw often whole troops of Spaniards run to and fro in the fields, which made them suspect their rallying, which they never had the courage to do. In the afternoon, Captain Morgan re-entered the city with his troops, that everyone might take up their lodgings, which now they could hardly find, few houses having escaped the fire. Then they sought very carefully among the ruins and ashes for utensils or plate or gold, that were not quite wasted by the flames, and of such they found no small number, especially in wells and cisterns, where the Spaniards had hid them. Next day Captain Morgan dispatched away 2 troops of 150 men each, stout and well armed, to seek for the inhabitants who were escaped. These, having made several excursions up and down the fields, woods, and mountains adjacent, returned after 2 days, bringing above 200 prisoners, men, women, and slaves. The same day returned also the boat which Captain Morgan had sent to the South Sea, bringing 3 other boats which they had taken. But all these prizes they could willingly have given, and greater labor into the bargain, for 1 galleon, which miraculously escaped, richly laden with all the king's plate, jewels, and other precious goods of the best and richest merchants of Panama, on board which were also the religious women of the nunnery, who had embarked with them all the ornaments of their church, consisting in much gold, plate, and other things of great value. The strength of this galleon was inconsiderable, having only 7 guns, and 10 or 12 muskets, and very ill provided with victuals, necessaries, and fresh water, having no more sails than the uppermost of the mainmast. This account the pirates received from someone who had spoken with 7 mariners belonging to the galleon, who came ashore in the cockboat for fresh water. Hence they concluded they might easily have taken it, had they given her chase, as they should have done. But they were impeded from following this vastly rich prize by their gluttony and drunkenness, having plentifully debauched themselves with several rich wines they found ready, choosing rather to satiate their appetites than to lay hold on such huge advantage, since this only prize would have been of far greater value than all they got at Panama and the places thereabout. Next day, repenting of their negligence, being weary of their vices and debaucheries, they set forth another boat, well armed, to pursue with all speed the said galleon, but in vain, the Spaniards who were on board having had intelligence of their own danger 1 or 2 days before, while the pirates were cruising so near them, whereupon they fled to places more remote and unknown. The pirates found, in the ports of the island of Tavoga and Tavogilla, several boats laden with very good merchandise, all which they took and brought to Panama, where they made an exact relation of all that had passed to Captain Morgan. The prisoners confirmed what the pirates said, adding that they undoubtedly knew where the galleon might then be, but that it was very probable they had been relieved before now from other places. This stirred up Captain Morgan anew to send forth all the boats in the port of Panama to seek the said galleon till they could find her. These boats, being in all 4, after 8 days cruising to and fro, and searching several ports and creeks, lost all hopes of finding her. Hereupon they returned to Tavoga and Tavogilla. Here they found a reasonable good ship, newly come from Payta, laden with cloth, soap, sugar, and biscuit, with 20,000 pieces of 8. This they instantly seized, without the least resistance, as also a boat which was not far off, on which they laded great part of the merchandises from the ship, with some slaves. With this purchase they returned to Panama, somewhat better satisfied, yet withal much discontented that they could not meet with the galleon. The The convoy which Captain Morgan had sent to the castle of Chagres returned much about the same time, bringing with them very good news. For while Captain Morgan was on his journey to Panama, those he had left in the castle of Chagres had sent for 2 boats to cruise. These met with a Spanish ship, which they chased within sight of the castle. This being perceived by the pirates in the castle, they put forth Spanish colors to deceive the ship that fled before the boats, and the poor Spaniards, thinking to take refuge under the castle, were caught in a snare and made prisoners. The cargo on board the said vessel consisted in victuals and provisions, than which nothing could be more opportune for the castle, where they began already to want things of this kind. This good luck of those of Chagres caused Captain Morgan to stay longer at Panama, ordering several new excursions into the country round about. And while the pirates at Panama were upon these expeditions, those at Chagres were busy in piracies on the North Sea. Captain Morgan sent forth daily parties of 200 men to make inroads into all the country round about, and when one party came back, another went forth, who soon gathered much riches and many prisoners. These being brought into the city, were put to the most exquisite tortures, to make them confess both other people's goods and their own. Here it happened that one poor wretch was found in the house of a person of quality, who had put on, amidst the confusion, a pair of taffety breeches of his master's, with a little silver key hanging out. Perceiving which, they asked him for the cabinet of the said key. His answer was, he knew not what was become of it, but that finding those breeches in his master's house, he had made bold to wear them. Not being able to get any other answer, they put him on the rack, and inhumanly disjointed his arms. Then they twisted a cord about his forehead, which they wrung so hard that his eyes appeared as big as eggs, and were ready to fall out. But with these torments not obtaining any positive answer, they hung him up by the wrists, giving him many blows and stripes under that intolerable pain and posture of body. Afterwards they cut off his nose and ears, and singed his face with burning straw, till he could not speak, nor lament his misery any longer. Then, losing all hopes of any confession, they bade a negro run him through, which put an end to his life, and to their inhuman tortures. Thus did many others of those miserable prisoners finish their days, the common sport and recreation of these pirates being such tragedies. Captain Morgan, having now been at Panama full 3 weeks, commanded all things to be prepared for his departure. He ordered every company of men to seek so many beasts of carriage as might convey the spoil to the river where his canoes lay. About this time there was a great rumour that a considerable number of pirates intended to leave Captain Morgan, and that, taking a ship then in port, they determined to go and rob on the South Sea, till they got as much as they thought fit, and then return homewards by way of the West Indies. For which purpose they had gathered much provisions, which they had hid in private places, with sufficient powder, bullets, and all other ammunition. Likewise some great guns belonging to the town, muskets, and other things, wherewith they designed not only to equip their vessel, but to fortify themselves in some island which might serve them for a place of refuge. This design had certainly taken effect, had not Captain Morgan had timely advice of it from one of their comrades. Hereupon he commanded the mainmast of the said ship to be cut down and burnt, with all the other boats in the port. Hereby the intentions of all or most of his companions were totally frustrated. Then Captain Morgan sent many of the Spaniards into the adjoining fields and country to seek for money, to ransom not only themselves, but the rest of the prisoners, as likewise the ecclesiastics. Moreover, he commanded all the artillery of the town to be nailed and stopped up. At the same time, he sent out a strong company of men to seek for the governor of Panama, of whom intelligence was brought that he had laid several ambuscades in the way by which he ought to return. But they returned soon after, saying they had not found any sign of such ambuscades. For confirmation whereof, they brought some prisoners, who declared that the said governor had had an intention of making some opposition by the way, but that the men designed to effect it were unwilling to undertake it, so that for want of means he could not put his design in execution. February 24th, 1671, Captain Morgan departed from Panama, or rather from the place where the city of Panama stood. Of the spoils whereof he carried with him 175 beasts of carriage, laden with silver, gold, and other precious things, beside about 600 prisoners, men, women, children, and slaves. That day they came to a river that passes through a delicious plain, a league from Panama. Here Captain Morgan put all his forces into good order, so that the prisoners were in the middle, surrounded on all sides with pirates, where nothing else was to be heard but lamentations, cries, shrieks, and doleful sighs of so many women and children, who feared Captain Morgan designed to transport them all into his own country for slaves. Besides, all those miserable prisoners endured extreme hunger and thirst at that time, which misery Captain Morgan designedly caused them to sustain, to excite them to seek for money to ransom themselves, according to the tax he had set upon every one. Many of the women begged Captain Morgan on their knees with infinite sighs and tears to let them return to Panama, there to live with their dear husbands and children in little huts of straw which they would erect, seeing they had no houses till the rebuilding of the city. But his answer was, he came not thither to hear lamentations and cries, but to seek money. Therefore they ought first to seek out that, wherever it was to be had, and bring it to him. Otherwise he would assuredly transport them all to such places whither they cared not to go. Next day, when the march began, those lamentable cries and shrieks were renewed, so as it would have caused compassion in the hardest heart. But Captain Morgan, as a man little given to mercy, was not moved in the least. They marched in the same order as before, one party of the pirates in the van, the prisoners in the middle, and the rest of the pirates in the rear, by whom the miserable Spaniards were at every step punched and thrust in their backs and sides, with the blunt ends of their arms, to make them march faster. A beautiful lady, wife to one of the richest merchants of Tavoga, was led prisoner by herself between two pirates. Her lamentations pierced the skies, seeing herself carried away into captivity, often crying to the pirates, and telling them that she had given orders to two religious persons, in whom she had relied, to go to a certain place and fetch so much money as her ransom did amount to, that they had promised faithfully to do it, but, having obtained the money, instead of bringing it to her, they had employed it another way, to ransom some of their own and particular friends. This ill action of theirs was discovered by a slave, who brought a letter to the said lady. Her complaints, and the cause thereof, being brought to Captain Morgan, he thought fit to inquire thereinto. Having found it to be true, especially hearing it confirmed by the confession of the said religious men, though under some frivolous exercises, of having diverted the money but for a day or two, in which time they expected more sums to repay it, he gave liberty to the said lady, whom otherwise he designed to transport to Jamaica. But he detained the said religious men as prisoners in her place, using them according to their deserts. Captain Morgan, arriving at the town called Cruz, on the banks of the river Chagre, he published an order among the prisoners that within 3 days every one should bring in their ransom, under the penalty of being transported to Jamaica. Meanwhile, he gave orders for so much rice and maize to be collected thereabouts, as was necessary for victualling his ships. Here some of the prisoners were ransomed, but many others could not bring in their money. Hereupon he continued his voyage, leaving the village on the 5th of March following, carrying with him all the spoil he could. Hence he likewise led away some new prisoners, inhabitants there, with those in Panama, who had not paid their ransom. But the 2 religious men, who had diverted the lady's money, were ransomed 3 days after by other persons, who had more compassion for them than they had showed for her. About the middle of the way to Chagre, Captain Morgan commanded them to be mustered, and caused every one to be sworn that they had concealed nothing, even not to the value of 6pence. This done, Captain Morgan, knowing those lewd fellows would not stick to swear falsely for interest, he commanded every one to be searched very strictly, both in their clothes and satchels, and elsewhere. Yea, that this order might not be taken ill by his companions, he permitted himself to be searched, even to his very shoes. To this effect, by common consent, one was assigned out of every company to be searchers of the rest. The French pirates that assisted on this expedition disliked this new practice of searching, but being outnumbered by the English, they were forced to submit as well as the rest. The search being over, they re-embarked, and arrived at the castle of Chagre on the 9th of March. Here they found all things in good order, excepting the wounded men whom they had left at their departure, for of these the greatest number were dead of their wounds. From Chagre, Captain Morgan sent, presently after his arrival, a great boat to Puerto Bello, with all the prisoners taken at the Isle of St. Catherine, demanding of them a considerable ransom for the castle of Chagre, where he then was, threatening, otherwise, to ruin it. To this those of Puerto Bello answered, they would not give 1 farthing towards the ransom of the said castle, and the English might do with it as they pleased. Hereupon the dividend was made of all the spoil made in that voyage, every company and every particular person therein receiving their proportion, or rather, what part thereof Captain Morgan pleased to give them. For the rest of his companions, even of his own nation, murmured at his proceedings, and told him to his face that he had reserved the best jewels to himself, for they judged it impossible that no greater share should belong to them than 200 pieces of 8 per capita, of so many valuable plunders they had made, which small sum they thought too little for so much labour, and such dangers as they had been exposed to. But Captain Morgan was deaf to all this, and many other like complaints, having designed to cheat them of what he could. At last, finding himself obnoxious to many censures of his people, and fearing the consequence, he thought it unsafe to stay any longer at Chagre, but ordered the ordnance of the castle to be carried on board his ship. Then he caused most of the walls to be demolished, the edifices to be burnt, and as many other things ruined as could be done in a short time. This done, he went secretly on board his own ship, without giving any notice to his companions, and put out to sea, being only followed by 3 or 4 vessels of the whole fleet. These were such as the French pirates believed as went shares with Captain Morgan in the best part of the spoil, which had been concealed from them in the dividend. The Frenchmen could willingly have revenged themselves on Captain Morgan and his followers, had they been able to encounter him at sea, but they were destitute of necessaries, and had much ado to find sufficient provisions for their voyage to Jamaica, he having left them unprovided for all things. End of Chapter 18. End of Pirates of Panama, by A.O. Exquemelin, translated by G.A. Williams. Read for LibriVox by Dennis Sayers, in Modesto, California, winter 2008.